Waiting on a few more folks. We have 1 minute, then we can start.
Great. And I think Christopher Johnson is in the attendees, so he might need to be promoted to panelist. I can see him
Okay.
raising his hand over there.
Let me see.
Hey, Lean. Hey, Lucia.
Hello. Okay, should we start now?
Yeah, let's get going. Before we go any further, Francisco, would be the person to talk us through the interpretation options?
Thank you, Alan. Yes, welcome everybody. And for those of you who have not gotten a chance to take advantage of this service offered by DOTI, we do have a Spanish interpretation. If you look at the bottom right of your screen, you see a globe for interpretation. You click on that globe and you select the language of your choice. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos para aquellos de ustedes que no han tenido oportunidad de recibir interpretación al español que ofrece DOTI en sus reuniones. Hacen el favor de pulsar el globito en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccionan el idioma de su preferencia. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Alan.
Great. Thank you so much, Francisco. It's always great to have you all here. We really appreciate you all making this meeting accessible for everyone in the community. Let's roll through the welcome. First of all, welcome to everyone to our DOTI Advisory Board meeting. It's great to see everyone here this evening. Thank you for joining us. Gary, would you like to open the meeting by starting with a roll call?
Will do. Let's go with alphabetical order for first name. Alicia Brown. Is Alicia here yet? There, I see you. Alan, see you here. Amy? I do not see Amy yet. Elaine, saw you. Yes. Brian, saw you attend. So Christopher, have you down? Yes. I'm here. Ian.
I'm here.
Oh, good job. Thank you. Jamie Lewis, saw you sign in. Jake, saw you come on. Haven't seen Joe. Is Joe on? Joe Levi?
Joe's on. Yep.
Joe,
Come
there
on.
you go. Thank you. And Jonathan, did I see you come on? No, Jonathan yet. And Julie is out of country. And Lucia, I see, is on as well. So is Paul on? I don't see Paul. And Tinsley. I see Tinsley on. I do not. So currently we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Paul just jumped
11.
on.
Say again.
I believe Paul just joined us.
Paul, very good. That gives us 12 on the current roster.
Great. Thanks so much, Gary.
And-
That is that quorum?
Well, according to my
so.
records,
Yeah.
there are 12 attending. That is the one plus the required 11. There are 2 that are listed on one of the roster that I've seen that expire as the 1st of April, and that was
We'll go through that maybe
Elite.
offline, Gary.
Yes, okay,
Yeah,
that's
we'll
fine.
let
Well, we
you
have
guys said, yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. We have
Jonathan
12.
just joined us too.
Who did?
Jonathan?
Hi.
Jonathan. Okay, Jonathan, very good. Well, then we definitely have quorum either way.
Great. Thanks so much for running through that, Gary. Appreciate that.
Alrighty.
Great. And Anita, do we have anyone for public comment today?
No, not today.
Great. No public comment. Great. If anyone in the attendees signed up for public comment, welcome to raise your hand, but otherwise we'll keep moving through here, but it sounds like no one did. One quick plug for this weekend before we get into the leadership report. Wanted to mention that oh, it looks like we did have one person, Saigopal. I am so sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing your name correctly. Rangaraj. Anita, would it be possible to promote that person?
Yes,
Thank you so much.
just did.
Great. So feel welcome. You've got 2 to 3 minutes. Feel welcome to introduce yourself and let us know what you'd like to share with the board today.
Hi there. Sorry, I missed that as I was rejoining as a panelist, but
Please welcome to introduce yourself, and you've got 2 to 3 minutes to share whatever you'd like with us today.
oh yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Saigopal. I am a resident of Denver, almost a year now, and glad to call this place my home. I think the point I wanted to talk about today is, as Denver is building out a lot of, or thinking about building out a lot of bus rapid transit routes through Colorado, Federal, West 38th, Colfax, I think something which is being overlooked is trolley buses as a method of building out these BRT lines and powering these lines. And I went through the Colfax report and reached out to the team behind the Colfax BRT corridor and flagged that this is a big oversight just in terms of powering BRT fleets. Because one, if we use gas or diesel buses, those will obviously generate emissions and in the long term will lead to higher operating costs. And then two, when it comes to wear and tear on the roads, say we do switch to battery electric vehicles, using like heavier vehicles will lead to greater wear and tear on roads, which will need more frequent maintenance updates. And then also will lead to greater wear and tear on tires, which leads to higher volatile organic compounds in the atmosphere. So I think those reasons all come back to the fact that we need to explore trolley buses as an alternative. And when it comes to that, I also think that a lot of people flag flexibility issues. And I think that you have trolley buses which can be powered like with a diesel generator or with a battery to support, running off of the trolley bus network as well. And they can also be automatically reattached to the wires with new technology. So a lot of the limitations of trolley buses have been addressed, and there are American manufacturers that do make trolley buses. So I think that's something I've been wanting to flag, and I think this is an important forum to flag it. So thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for your public comment today. We appreciate it. And good news, one of our RTD board directors, Director Lewis, is here as well. So I'm glad he got to hear that also.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Well, great. So Nick, would you like to dive into the DOTI staff report?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. And I think Amy will probably join a little bit later today, but always happy to provide an update. Got about 5 items here. First up, speaking of Colfax BRT, at Council on Monday, received approval to amend our IGA, our intergovernmental agreement with RTD, in furtherance of the Colfax BRT project. So that's a pretty exciting, I'm going to say maybe exciting to this group, milestone, probably not to the general public, but is exciting that project is moving forward. and meeting milestones on that. Budget, of course, this group put together a letter to the department and to the city regarding upcoming budget cuts. I think there should be some news coming out publicly on that in the relatively near future, but just wanted to tell this group that we are working with DOF and our Department of Finance, who really leads the communications around this, to get a very specific response to this group. We just really want to appreciate the effort that went into that. Want to make sure that we are providing a sufficient response on that. Then a couple exciting events happened recently. First up, Broadway Bike Lane. So we did our official kickoff, even though it had been kind of kicked off previously, a soft kickoff, but our official kickoff in partnership with the Denver Streets Partnership on Saturday. And despite the wind, still had about 100 folks show up. Some of them ended up back in Aurora before they knew it with the wind, but still a very successful event on that, and very excited to get that officially launched on there. Also in the kind of more fun side of things, in city tradition and DOTI tradition, we painted the purple stripe for the Colorado Rockies for their home opener last week, and they were good enough to return the favor and win their first game. And that's it. I'm not going to follow any of the rest of their games and just kind of go out on that high note on there. But that's always something fun we do, and the mayor was able to participate in that. And then last thing, folks probably heard, and this is while not particularly sexy, but it is a very both important thing environmentally and can have kind of a negative impact on residents if they're not aware. Street sweeping began April 1st on there. And that is, of course, I think we hear mostly about it in terms of the tickets that result from that. But that is, I always want to remind folks, that is a very important and I think regulatorily required something we do for air quality, making sure that we are reducing fine particulate matters in the air as much as possible on that. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stop, but happy to answer any questions.
So to cut you guys, Amy is here right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Also happy to cede the floor to the executive director or put her on the spot.
I think she was referring to one of our board member, Amy is here, not our executive director for being here. But okay, yeah, so we're happy to have Amy from District 3 joining us too. But maybe, yes, but if Director Ford is here on a different profile than what's listed, she's welcome to pipe in too.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ellen.
Yep. Any questions for Nick for DOTI leadership? Nope, great. Quick reminder, please be sure to update your name with last name or district, whatever you feel comfortable with. Oh, Lucia, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm just kind of curious. I've been reading a lot about the closure of the bike lane in front of Coors Field. I was reminded of it when you said the purple stripe during games. Why are we closing the bike lane? I understand.
My guess.
Cars.
Sorry, please finish.
Yeah, I mean, I understand closing it to cars, but why close the bike lane, which is kind of cyclists?
I'm going to tell you what my hypothesis is, and I'll come back with the official word on this, and I might even be able to get it while we're here and put it in the chat. I do believe that is something from a safety standpoint that has been closed off to all vehicular traffic. If I remember correctly, you can still walk a vehicle through there, but it's the volume of crowds that they have asked us to close that street during those game days. But I will get official word on that and official reasoning on it. That's a good question, Lucia.
Any other questions for Nick? Nope, great. Let's dive in. Taylor Phillips, I think I saw Taylor join us a minute ago, is here, one of our outstanding senior city planners from DOTI, and is going to be giving us an update on Denver Moves bikes. There was some public info. DOTI did a great job of communicating it a few weeks or a month or so ago, I think it was. A couple board members had some questions around there, so Taylor was generous enough with their time to come in and join us today. So Taylor, take it away.
Cool. I'm getting a message that says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. I thought I had clicked my fancy link.
Nanita, could you enable screen sharing for Taylor if you don't mind, please?
Oh, wait, here we go. It
Yeah,
looks
I
like
just
might
did.
have Just
Perfect.
okay. And can everybody see the main presentation page? Yeah, great, cool. I'm so used to Teams, this Zoom stuff just throws me off sometimes. So yeah, thank you guys for having me. Thanks, Alan, for reaching out. This is a great kind of touch point for us to give a quick update on the Denver Moves Bikes update. So yeah, real quick today, if I can get this, I'm gonna go over kind of our process overview, where we're at in the project right now, a summary of community engagement results. We had a big, robust community engagement push in November, December, as you all may remember. And then I'll talk about kind of what we're doing with all this data and how we're processing both the community engagement results as well as a ton of other data sources to develop a recommended bike network. And then we'll talk about kind of next steps and where we're headed. Cool. So process overview. Where are we at right now? So it is now spring 2024. As you might remember, back in November, December, we had a big online interactive map and survey. We went to a bunch of pop-up events. We had a virtual public meeting where we asked folks just generally, we're gathering existing conditions. What do you think about biking in Denver? Are there streets that stink that you want us to improve? Are there streets that are doing great that you want to see more of? Just really kind of gathering an existing conditions of where we're at. So now here we are, we're in the spring. We are doing a ton of data analysis, number crunching, cool geospatial technical work in GIS and other kind of programs and stuff. That's pretty cool and fun. And then in the summer, probably around July, we're going to come out with a draft recommended bike network. And we're going to go back to the public and do kind of the same thing, maybe probably a lot more robust since it'll be summertime instead of the holidays. Where we're going to have an online survey, an interactive map that display the recommended bike network. We're going to go to pop-up events. We're going to do another public meeting. And we're going to try to just spread the word as far and as wide as we can. So once we're finished with that public outreach push in kind of July through September-ish, we'll refresh, we'll make sure that we incorporate all of the comments that we hear, and then the project will end and we'll have our draft recommended map in kind of the late fall, early winter 2024. And then of course we'll continue to iterate on this and implement projects and make sure that we're kind of keeping up with the cutting edge, and this will be kind of a living map for the rest of forever. So that's just where we are now. So summary of our engagement results. So you might remember the online survey. I hope that all of you took it back in November, December. We got an amazing response from this. There was kind of an online survey portion that asked a bunch of specific questions about bicycling, and then there was the map portion. So the survey portion received 2,500 survey responses, and then the map portion got 4,700 distinct comments on it. Over 3,000 unique contributors put those comments on the map. And then a big thing that we heard, I think from this group actually, was the importance of kind of the upvotes and downvotes and being able to comment on other people's comments. We got 57,000 upvotes and downvotes, which is crazy. It's super cool to see that everyone was using that, and really good indicator that we should continue to use that type of feature in the future for online engagement. So in addition to all of our online type interactions with folks, we had a couple of community-based outreach partners. Those were folks that we hired in the community and paid a small stipend to help us outreach in our inverted L or equity areas. So they went to 18 different events across 11 neighborhoods and had conversations with people about bicycling. We had an email and voicemail inbox where we received a bunch of emails and voicemails. And then 121 folks attended our virtual public meeting on November 15th. So pretty strong contention of folks talking about bikeways. So quick summary, our community-based outreach partners. So this is Paolo. He's one of our community-based outreach partners, or CBOPs as we call them. So him and another guy went to a bunch of locations in our inverted L areas. They went to kind of pop-ups, rec centers. I think Paolo even kind of walked up and down Federal Street, went to a bunch of bike shops, just talked to people in the neighborhoods in our Globeville area, Swansea, and our kind of southwest Denver neighborhoods. So they reached a ton of folks. They were a huge help to get the word out in our neighborhoods that we don't typically hear from. So what did we hear from folks? So in the kind of survey portion of the online tool, we asked folks, what are your top barriers to bicycling in Denver? And what would, that prevent you from riding a bike or other small transportation device more often? So our top 3 comments here were not enough physical protection from cars, roads and intersection crossings feel unsafe, and bicycle routes have too much car traffic, and then that there are just not enough existing bikeways. So all of this really points to me that we need to bolster our kind of our upgrade.
Can I use your
program.
phone?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Amy. No. I'm sorry. So this just, to me says we need to bolster our kind of upgrade program. We need to look at spot improvements at intersections. We need to look at upgrading some of our existing bikeways from maybe a striped bike lane to a protected bike lane where the speed and volume of motor vehicles warrant that upgrade. And super relevant to what we're trying to achieve through this project. So one question that we asked on the map portion was which bikeways are working well. You can see here the map's not labeled. I have a geospatial just photographic memory of all the bikeways in Denver. So the stuff that pops out to me are our protected bike lanes, our neighborhood bikeways. So 35th in Northwest, 17th in Northwest also, the 13th Ave and 14th Ave PBLs through kind of downtown. Blake Street is also a big one. 7th Avenue, also one that really pops to me. So this really to me just says, hey, all of our protected bikeways are neighborhood bikeways. Those are the things that folks really like that are working well. I see we've got a hand up, so I'll pause real quick for Tinsley.
Hi, thank you for joining us tonight. So I had a couple of questions looking at this map, and I'm sure the rest of the board already know where I'm going with this, but so I'm from the far northeast, and we definitely have some bike lane issues in regards to, number one, the location of them, also that there's a lack thereof, and then lastly, we feel that just as your survey put out, that definitely the drivers are not safe for sure in our area. And so I just kind of wanted to ask you what are further plans, I guess, for just the whole far northeast in general terms, for additions. I know that they took out the poles, interestingly, on Green Valley Ranch Boulevard, I believe. And so just also wanting to know, kind of being nosy, what's up with that as well. If you could kind of give a quick update on that, that'd be great.
So as far as the Green Valley Ranch posts, I don't know. I don't know about that, but I can look into it and get back to you.
Cool.
I usually, most of my kind of work is in central and southwest Denver. So I'm not as familiar with Green Valley Ranch. As far as stuff coming down the pipeline, we're looking at some paving projects. I think you might have seen last year we kicked off some projects on Kittredge and Uvalde in kind of the far northeast area. Those are 2 that I know that are coming down the pipe pretty soon. And then this project, the Denver Moves Bikes update, is really looking citywide at where we're recommending future projects to be funded and implemented. And the goal here is that all of our households in Denver are within a 1/4 mile of a high comfort bike facility. So I know that our 2015 map that you probably saw back when we did that public outreach push in November, December, doesn't really fulfill that goal in far northeast in particular. So the goal of this update is to look at streets where we can densify that recommended network and identify good projects for future funding.
Well, let me know if you'd like to talk offline about that too. But my follow-up question is, do you guys partner all with like the safe routes to schools in any manner, as far as like bike routes that are closer to school areas, I guess is my question.
Yeah, we've got the Safe Routes to School coordinator, John, is on my team actually. So I work with him a lot and to kind of identify bikeway improvements and how we can co-install bikeway improvements with other pedestrian and bus safety projects around schools. So yeah, to that question, we do work with John a lot.
Great. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yeah, totally. Cool. I'll keep us moving and grooving here. So another question we asked folks on the map was, where are there challenging intersections for walking and biking? So to me, this really like pops out our arterials, our river and railroad crossings, or our highway crossings. So, you know, no huge surprise there. It's hard to cross big streets. It's hard to cross the river. It's hard to cross the highways and railroads. So these are potential, you know, locations where we could look into identifying intersection spot improvement type of projects in the future. And again, this is just one small piece of the puzzle of all of the data that's going into this project. Another question we asked folks was, you know, where are there not currently recommended bikeways where you'd like to see bikeways, or you currently ride your bike a lot, but there's not a recommended bikeway on our map currently. So I used to live in like Northwest Denver. So one that pops out to me is like Wolf Street. I used to bike up and down Wolf Street all the time to get from Berkeley Lake down to Sloan's Lake. And that's like a great, calm, comfortable connection that's not reflected in our current recommended bikeway network. So all of these lines have gone into kind of our potential network additions or streets that we could consider for future bikeways. We also got a ton of feedback that's kind of not exactly location specific, maybe a little bit outside the scope of this project, but stuff that we learned that we'll take to heart at DOTI and continue to work on. Some of these weather, obviously, DOTI can't work on, but convenience, you know, we heard that the distance between people's homes and the destinations that they need to go to are sometimes too far to bike. So, you know, it's really important that we partner with RTD. We look at kind of first last mile connections and ways we can make those trips feel a little shorter. Directness, people want bikeways that are not circuitous, that are pretty straight ahead, easy to get to. Roadway crossings are safe. Bike storage is a really common theme that came up. We're working with our bike parking team here at DOTI to build as much bike parking as we can, as fast as we can. But that still remains a huge concern. If you don't have a place to leave your bike at the end of your journey, it makes that trip really hard to do. Some folks had different, you know, thoughts on temporary materials, whether they like the plastic bollards, whether they prefer more permanent materials. Education was a big thing. People, you know, wanted more education both on the driver's side and the bicyclist side, so that everybody knows the rules of the road, how to interact with each other, how to bike safely, how to drive safely around bicyclists, etc. And then, of course, weather. Sometimes it's really hot, sometimes it's really cold. Not really fun to bike in those extremes. Nothing we can do about that in particular for this project, but definitely something to consider with our snowplow operations and things of that nature. Cool. So update on network changes. What are we going to do with all of this data, these 53,000 upvotes and downvotes? So our process, this is a very, very simplified high-level version of kind of the analysis that we're working on right now. So it's kind of a 3-step process, and we'll pretend that there's like a little arrow here that loops as this is iterative, and we're going to be going through all of these steps over and over again over the course of the next couple of months. So the first step is additions to the new additions, of new bikeways to the network. So that's identifying the whole gambit of streets that we could consider bikeways on. The next step to that is assigning appropriate bike facility types. So is this going to be a neighborhood bikeway, a striped bike lane, a buffered bike lane, a protected bike lane? And those are based on vehicle speed and volumes typically. And then the next step of this is assessing the feasibility of those new bikeways and the bikeway upgrades. So just because something says that a street needs a protected bike lane doesn't mean we're able to fit a protected bike lane on the street. Sometimes the streets are simply too narrow to fit two directions of travel and protected bikeways. So just making sure that all of the recommendations that we come up with through this process are actually implementable given the right-of-way constraints and real world things that we face, but still being visionary. I will say we're not saying no to removing curbs or anything like that, but we're trying to be implementable. So yeah, just real quick, the addition of the new bikeways to the network, things that we're using to identify those are the gaps identified by community members in that last map that I showed. Projects identified through neighborhood plans that weren't integrated into the 2015 bike plan, data from e-bikes and e-scooter apps, so where people are currently biking, so that's Strava. Ride Report tells us where all of the scooter people are scooting, and then looking at crash data to identify where are people biking and getting in crashes that are happening outside of our existing or proposed network. So that tells us where there's some demand for biking, but it's maybe not very safe. So the next step is that analysis process of assigning the facility types. So that's pretty simple. We're using vehicle speeds and volumes. That's the nationally accepted standard for how to assign facility types. There's a chart that shows you basically at X speed and X volume, you need a neighborhood bikeway. Once you go up, you need a buffered bikeway. Once you go up from there, you need a protected bikeway or a trail or shared use path or something of that nature. So we're looking at those things, and then again also looking at where there are bike involved crashes, where are we hearing from the community about different facility types and facility type preferences. And finally, looking at, like I said, curb to curb width, parking demand, other existing conditions factors, and if there are projects or there are streets where we're like, this is just there, it's not going to fit. We can't fit all of the modes, all of the things on this street. We'll look for parallel routes and we'll kind of start over the process from scratch with that parallel route and make sure that we're assigning facility types adequately for that. Cool. So looking ahead, our next steps, we're still in that kind of data crunch mode. We're assigning facility types and assessing the feasibility. So those second two steps are where we're at right now, working on that now through kind of end of May. And then we'll have a draft updated network probably in late June, kick off public outreach mid to late July. And then, yeah, so my ask for you right now, Alan, I know you said that these folks wanted some stuff to reflect upon and some asks. We're really in the kind of data crunching phase, which is annoying, but I really hope that in the summer, as you guys are learning about events, particularly in our kind of inverted L equity areas, please email me and let me know if there are events that we should go to engage the community. I think that's kind of the hardest part of the public engagement stuff, is finding those events that we can tack onto and spread the word. So with that, I'll answer some questions. I don't know, Alan, if you want to facilitate.
Yeah, great. Tinsley, did you have another question, or is your hand just up from the previous one?
My bad.
No worries. Aileen,
Okay.
take it away.
Thanks, Taylor. This is really comprehensive and easy to understand, the presentation that is. I have a question about the hot zone slide. Do you mind going back to it?
This one?
There, yeah, challenging intersections. Okay, well, so here I live in Southeast Denver. So Hamden is a huge problem for anybody on a
Yeah.
that wants to get from our little corner of Denver to anywhere else in the network. And I'm concerned that it didn't even show up on this map. And so can you speak to that and I'm hoping that you'll give me some assurances that because I mean, obviously I wrote a lot of the comments down there. I know other people wrote comments, other people upvoted, like a number of the intersections basically all along Hamden there were noted as unsafe because it's a state highway.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to cross. So can you just make me feel better about that? And then I had one more question.
Yeah, so this map is really just showing the hot spots, so where we heard the most, and where we heard the most is always going to be in central Denver for any citywide planning process, just because of the population density. There's so many people that are already biking, and that's where a lot of our kind of advocates and folks that we interact with a lot live. So do not fret. We have all of your comments. This is really just to show kind of our, the hot spots and the most commented locations. I think that honestly, in our further out neighborhoods where we don't have as many comments, we're probably like more likely to go through and read each of those individually, because those are the neighborhoods that we don't know as much about, because nobody's been, people don't tell us about them every day. I don't get emails every day about kind of our further out neighborhoods. So that's where we really want to rely on that comment map to look really closely at the comments and say, okay, this is what the people that are the experts in these neighborhoods are saying.
Great. Because I want to be able to let my son bike to school, but I get really nervous about the idea of him crossing Hamden. My other question has to do with the final stage of your analysis in determining the feasibility of thank you. Assessing the feasibility of the new bikeways and bikeway upgrades. And I think this is fantastic. I think my concern here is I know there are standards, although there's still a subjective element to this. And I get really worried when, let me tell it as a story. 10 years ago, I was told that there were no more bike lanes we could add in Denver. All the easy bike lanes had been added, and obviously we know how much has been accomplished since then, and how many miles of bike lanes and protected bike lanes and buffered bike lanes that have been added through the whole city. And I get worried that someone is going to be like, well, feasible suggestion, and they're not looking more carefully or more closely at creative solutions, or they're prioritizing car storage over safety of the users on the street, or the lanes are still pretty wide, or we have a jazzed up engineer excited about 100-year flood zones. Like, I don't know, like, who gets to say if it's feasible or not, I think is where I'm getting at. I don't even know if you can respond, but comment, question-ish. So,
I think that's a great,
that's it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's kind of like, the existential crisis of transportation planning, and how we've been evolving so quickly over time. Like 10 years ago, that person that told you that there's no more room for bike lanes in the city, that was before we had neighborhood bikeways as a tool in the toolkit. That was before we had protected bike lanes as a tool in the toolkit. So I think that DOTI planners and engineers are actually very progressive. Our bikeway design guidance is very progressive. And I think something that's really tricky is looking at feasibility today with limited funding, without blowing out the curbs, buying up property, versus feasibility of, we're reconstructing this roadway from scratch. How can we, re-envision it? And that gives you a lot more room to play with. And so something that we're gonna this is annoying, and it's going to be roadway by roadway, piece by piece, is where are those visionary projects where we have the room in our, existing right of way that DOTI owns, that if we blew out the curbs, if we started from scratch, we could put all of the complete streets elements on the street, versus where are the roads that we're just like, that road's probably not going to be reconstructed in our lifetime. Probably juice ain't worth the squeeze. Is there a parallel route that would probably actually be more comfortable and more safe, like a neighborhood bikeway route? That would be better. Yeah.
Brian, we could hear you. Did you have a question? Or is that just a errant mic?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble unmuting
Oh, no
myself.
worries at all. Just want to make sure your voice was heard if you had anything.
Yep.
Jake?
Awesome. Thanks for coming, Taylor. This is really awesome. Every Denver Moves Bikes update is like it's like Christmas to me, so I really appreciate you sharing. I get really, really excited and want to like peel back all the layers immediately. But no, I think a lot of these additions are really exciting. It's great to see that looking at additions and feasibility options. I have to bring this up, and I know that you mentioned people in central Denver bring up things a lot. I represent Council District 10, so I would be in trouble with all the people I represent if I didn't bring this one up. But the like number one thing I hear by far that anyone brings to my attention is north-south routes in kind of mid Cap Hill, Uptown, and Lauma Placita area. I'm sure you're aware of that. But like particularly a gap between like Pennsylvania and Marion effectively, or like to go with your bigger streets, Logan and Downing. But I know everyone in that area would be very, very excited to see even something like a neighborhood bikeway. I know that I hear from them more often that they want to, you know, super protected cycle track, etc., which sounds phenomenal. But I think that even a treatment like Garfield would be like a dream in like Central Cap Hill and North Capitol Hill. I just need to do my lobbying for that.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, you're right. There's definitely a lack of north-south connectivity in central Denver, especially that kind of Cap Hill neighborhood. And I think a lot of our South Central community transportation networks, if you've been kind of following along those projects, some of them are, you know, coming soon, TBD on dates and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely heard.
Thank you. And those community transportation networks are awesome, by the way.
Thank you. And then I think Joe might be our last.
Am I on? Okay.
Go for it, Joe.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Again, a very nice presentation. Taylor, thank you so much for doing that. I think we're all very enthusiastic about what's going on the bicycles in Denver. And what I was impressed with was the parallel routes. And I cycle quite a bit, and I would never go on a busy street no matter what. And I ride even on Logan early in the morning, and that can be dangerous. So I think with the way Denver drivers are right now, that even it's foolish to think you could ever have a protected enough bike lane. So I'd encourage the parallel routes, and then also encourage where the parallel routes cross major traffic areas, something be done about that. And there's plenty of, big streets that the cars are going 45, 50 miles an hour, and you're waiting on the side of the road and hoping that if you wait 5 minutes after the light changes, you'll be safe. So just not only the parallel routes, but the way they cross the major routes is important, I think, to a lot of people. And the other thing I'm hearing from my district is people really want their kids to go out and ride a bike, and they're concerned about how they get there and how to make it easy so they can cross the major streets. So thank you again for the fine presentation. And I love the work you guys are doing. Can't wait to see the next bike path near my house. Thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Joe.
Great. Any other questions for Taylor? One comment, just since our folks on that are viewing this can't see our chat. Comment from Director Lewis. Big picture for northbound bike lanes is to connect to a trail that runs along 36, I think referring to the US 36 trail. So one more input there as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Taylor? Nothing else in chat? Great. Well, Taylor, thanks so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.
Great. This next topic, and Jake, feel welcome to add color commentary, is an update on large development review. This has been something that this group has been asking for a while. This is a new topic, exciting, that we haven't really talked about before. So we're excited to have Eric from the DOTI planning side of things joining us to discuss this. And I know Glenn's here as well. Thank you for joining us too. Glenn, Jake, do you have anything to add as a lead into this?
No, this really stems back quite a ways. You know, we've regularly done the topic check-ins with the board, and one thing that continuously rose to the top were kind of rough questions around like your ball arenas, River North Stadium District kind of projects. And so here we're trying to combine all of that and get around to that topic list that many of you even contributed a long time ago to, but wanted to make sure that we dug in a little deeper as well. And just a little caveat here, a lot of the work on large developments is community planning and development. So reminder that that part sits with them, and we really want to hone in on where DOTI sits in this process. So thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jake. And Eric, we're so excited to have you here for the first time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time today. So we'll, I don't know if Anita's had a chance to make you a co-host yet, but if she hasn't, we'll let her get to that, and feel welcome to take it away.
Yeah, we'll find out. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm like Taylor said, I'm more functional in Teams than Zoom, so I may have a little bit of operator error here, but let me go ahead and share my screen and let me know if that pops up.
Looks great.
All right, looks like it's green at least. So, so I figured I'd start off with just a little bit about me, since I have not been a participant in this group before today. I am an engineering manager with Development Engineering Services, which is part of Right-of-Way Services, with part of DOTI, right? I have 3 review teams that report to me: the Transportation Engineering Review, the Wastewater Engineering Review, the Major Storm and Sanitary Facilities, and a Sewer Use and Drainage Permitting team that does the more minor storm and sanitary work for development projects in the city. I have been with the city for 20 years, all of it with Development Engineering Services in some role, from I started as a staff engineer now to the manager of the group. So I did prepare this presentation on the large development review. I appreciate, Jake, what you said about this is a community planning and development effort, but we are one of the major stakeholders in that effort. And so it is a little bit unique on how we don't drive it, we don't own it, but we're really important in the entire process. So an overview of the large development review. It was a process created by Community Planning and Development in 2019. It replaced the old general development plan process, which some of you may have been familiar with. That was tied to the old zoning code, where the new large development review is tied to the new zoning code. The overarching intent was to ensure that major development projects implement city council adopted plans, and specifically in regards to land use, development density, and regional public infrastructure, which includes, from the DOTI perspective, which is where most of DOTI's perspective lies, with roadways, storm and sanitary infrastructure, all of our mobility improvements, our bike connections, and our ped connections. So how does the large development review fit into the overarching development process? As expected, I think the large development review comes at the beginning for the projects that rise to the level of needing a large development review. It establishes a framework and expectations that will become the guiding documents for the major project as they head through the rest of the entitlement process. So it happens before the subdivisions, the formal site development plans, the detailed engineering that's done for the roadways and the wastewater. And then obviously before that phase or after that phase of the entitlement then becomes all the permitting, inspections, construction of the buildings, and acceptance of the buildings and opening the infrastructure to the public. I will start with this slide by saying I threw way too much information on this slide, and I did it on purpose because I figured this document can become a little bit of a guide for people that either couldn't attend this meeting or for reference in the future. And I'm not going to go into every little bit of this here, but the elements of a large development review, you know, as I stated in the overview, primarily the coordinated review to ensure consistency with our adopted plans, and predominantly from DOTI's perspective, the public infrastructure expectations identified in those adopted plans. The public infrastructure isn't limited to just where DOTI plays in the sandbox. You know, it includes the size and location of parks, schools, affordable housing in some cases. But yeah, the bread and butter for us is the major or significant roadway and mobility infrastructure and the wastewater infrastructure needed for the development. Other elements of the large development review are a phasing plan that lays out the timing and responsibility of infrastructure. That's really important when a project is phased over many years. And there's also a requirement for a community information meeting with large development reviews. So there's an opportunity for the public to get information about a project way earlier than they would when they start seeing, you know, bulldozers in the ground or things getting torn down and start asking what's going on, and the entitlements are already done. So that's a nice little plus of the large development review. The final outcome of the review is to get a framework document that becomes the roadmap of guidance documents that influence the design, the regulatory steps that have to be done for a developer to build out their project, and then the major project requirements. You know, like primary example for DOTI is, you know, there's a regional bikeway or a bike connection along this street from A to B or through your site, you know, that needs to be accounted for in your design. Criteria for when a large development review is required. It is required when a city council adopted plan calls for one. There are areas in the city where probably like Ball Arena is a good example, where we know there's going to be something coming that is part of a bigger process that the neighborhood plan may not have gone into the level of detail that we know is going to happen. And so they identify that it has a large development review later on in the process. I think I skimmed over, or I said it too quickly. These are all criteria of when a large development review may be required. These are not, if you have this, you must do it. Even the city council adopted plan is still a may, depending on the size and scope of the project. Size and scope is one of the major triggers, you know, when the area is more than 5 acres or 3 blocks, and that generally is because those projects are phased over time. When there's major infrastructure needs that can't be obtained through the traditional normal development process is also a reason to do a large development review. I'll speak to that a little more on the next slide, because it's not that one doesn't apply to DOTI as much. The large development review is also done when a general development plan needs to be amended. So an older framework document that is amended based on new market conditions or new plans from the developer. And last but not least, when requested by the applicant. I don't believe that's ever happened yet, but it is a tool available to them if they want to do it. It looks like, Tinsley, you have your hand up. Do you have a question about this?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to kind of ask, well, kind of make a couple statements and then also ask a question of this particular slide in general. So I'm from Green Valley Ranch, and there has been a and not to focus on the past, but with the new developments that have been out here for the past like 15 years or so, there has been a lot of like hands off in terms of like the DOTI side of planning and development as it relates to the new developments out here, honestly. And there's still a couple of like major plots that are being developed out here, including like on 56 and Tower, etc. And I'm just really interested and worried all at the same time what the DOTI investment and planning is going to be for these the rest of the new development out here, because we've had such a lack in the first place that I'm worried the trend will continue per se.
Yeah, and I probably can't speak to the overarching planning documents that community planning and development would do in these areas.
I'm talking about bike lanes, streets, all
but
that.
the master plans developed by DOTI, we do implement through every subdivision or large development review. So I do think, you know, I've been, as I stated in the beginning, I've been doing this a long time. I even reviewed projects out in your district at one time. I do believe there's a lot of previous agreements that are sometimes harder to unwind out there. There's the Denver connection area, which was, you know, south of Green Valley Ranch, between Chambers and all the way over to Tower. That has, for example, that has like a 450-page development agreement that lays out some very specific stuff that we have been able to address newer features and new functions as we go along, but it is a little bit harder, and maybe that's partially why some of the overarching stuff isn't done. But the PED master plan, the bike master plan, all has identified corridors and plans for this area, and we don't rely on just the city council adopted neighborhood plans for those.
That's good to know. Thank you so much.
Right. And let me move on the next slide here. So I tried to break down a little bit about what the LDRs mean for DOTI specifically, or large development reviews. I'm sorry if I tend to go right back to the acronyms way too quickly, but hopefully LDR is a pretty easy one. For the most part, DOTI does not need the large development review process. This is because well, for two reasons. We utilize the same standards and criteria for the design and construction of all of our roadway, bike, and wastewater facilities, whether there's a large development review or not. We also have really clear and firm authority to require all of our improvements through the normal or traditional development process. So DOTI's infrastructure technically rarely meets, or almost, well, really doesn't ever meet the trigger for needing a large development review due to infrastructure that we can't get through the normal process. Other agencies do have that, and coordination with the other agencies' improvements is still a really important factor of the large development review. And that's where I went into the benefits of an LDR for DOTI. It really is the phased construction. It provides a much earlier discussion on what is expected to be constructed and when. It's really important for a lot of the significant improvements that are typically also the significant mobility connections. You know, the bridges, the bridges over the creeks, the culverts, the underpasses. Those are high dollar things. So ensuring that they get done early enough in the project, far enough along that the developer has enough going to construct them, but that they're not waiting till the last project to go in to get the most significant infrastructure. So having that conversation early is a big benefit of the large development review. The interagency coordination is also a big benefit to DOTI, particularly where there are requirements or features that are being worked out during the large development review process from other agencies. The key one that pops into my mind is a major park and how we will address it. You know, that'll influence how we address our mobility connections and our street designs surrounding that park. And then I mentioned it earlier, but the early community input is always a plus of, and without the large development review, there is no required public meeting of a development unless they're also rezoning their property. So.
Eric, we had a question from Tinsley in chat asking if LDR is be able to use for all of Green Valley Ranch, even when there's been some development. So could you help provide a little clarity? So versus kind of existing construction, where do LDRs come into play versus completely, new construction?
Again, the call might be more in community planning and developments bucket, but what I have seen is that in areas that have a lot of the general development plans, which isn't applicable to all of your area, Tinsley, but like the 61st and Pena, the aviation station area, there is a general development plan in place. So unless there was a plan to amend it, there probably wouldn't be a requirement to do a large development review on top of that. On the flip side, as an example out there, is the Pepsi distribution plant that changed what was originally planned for in the neighborhood plan. So they went through multiple steps to update the neighborhood plan and then do an additional framework agreement. The infrastructure master plan is a little different from a one single user than it is when you're having 10 blocks being developed over time. But it has been done in some areas, but it does tend to be tied to more where it's changed from the original plans that are in place. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
And it sounds like she's asking how a citizen might advocate for this. It sounds like this might be incorporated into an overall area plan for that neighborhood that might fall into the more the community planning and development overall scope. Is that a fair statement? Is kind of maybe what she's more looking for?
I think that is a fair statement, but it's a little bit of both, because I do think when development changes or the plan changes and it's a significant enough development, there can be a follow-up. If it's not an amending a existing plan, it would be doing a large development review. It's just in most cases, the major infrastructure has been laid out. I know that the mobility improvements, we're always catching up to our expanding and new standards for bike lanes and bike facilities. But the goal is to definitely implement them with all the projects, whether there's a large development review or not.
It looks like we have a question from Joe as well.
Well, thank you. Again, Eric, you're 20 years. Take it from me, you're just the beginning of your career.
Boy,
so
I hope not.
Oh, you love your job, I'm sure. Yeah. My question is this this information on the LDRs, is it available? Is there a map of all of them? How would we find out more about those? Yeah.
Actually, my last slide, I did include a map of all the executed framework agreements. It's probably a little unuser friendly, but if we share out a PDF of this or the PowerPoint, you can definitely zoom in on it a little bit. I will ask, I'm sure there is a spot that community planning and development keeps all of the executed agreements online. I know there used to be part of the completed plans on their completed plans page, but I'm not positive the LDRs are there or not, but I can find that out and see. That'll give you specific information for all the executed framework agreements.
Thank you.
All right, I think I'll head to the next slide then. I did bring up some potential concerns from the DOTI perspective with the process. These are all things that, you know, can be addressed, and we've been working on as we've gone through them since 2019 to make them better. You know, one of the major things that we found is that there's the potential for unidentified requirements or issues that just can't be found during the master plan level analysis, right? So that once the in-depth survey is done, the in-depth title work, the encumbrances on the property, even the environmental work comes in, it may change some of the assumptions that were made during the master plan phase of the project. In addition, the breadth of the large development review, it does not go to as many stakeholders or referral agencies as a complete subdivision or site development plan. And that sometimes can lead to a comment that impacts something further down the road. I think we've been working with community planning and development to either broaden that scope, or we do it case by case where we'll reach out to the fire department to make sure that we don't have surprises down the road. So we're learning as we go. Another concern has always been the conceptual nature of the large development review is sometimes lost. And this happens, it happens kind of naturally because we, you know, in DOTI, we work to ensure that we're setting out the minimum standards for all of our infrastructure in this document. What we put in as a minimum, you know, the developer is looking at as, well, okay, that's all I have to do for this development project. You know, it's the maximum for them. It's their maximum outlay. And so it becomes important to get our intent statements in there and build in flexibility in the framework so that it can change. It can still be a useful tool to get the intents. And, you know, and a good example would be a Telluride, I'll go back into your area, Tinsley, Telluride, you know, north of 64th, you know, I think there's a development there looking at a slightly different alignment for Telluride. As long as we get the road to connect where it needs to connect, and the geometry works to meet our standards, it doesn't matter if it matches exactly what was in a previous plan. So getting that, building in that flexibility is also important. And my last comment on the concerns is when you do a large development review, I mean, it can add a significant amount of time to the process. You know, the average time to completion for the ones that have been done has been over 200 days. That isn't a reason not to do it. It is a reason to make sure that when we do it, we're getting a bang for our buck, or bang for the developer's time, basically, right? And making sure that we get the outcomes that we want. There is a hard to read list of the executed frameworks here, but I will click here to the next slide, which does show the map. And I did include a little list of the areas. I didn't put addresses there. So if you're, you know, not familiar with where the Kennedy Center is, you won't know, but there are 16 executed large development frameworks in place around the city. I believe there's just over 10 major projects that are either currently being considered for a large development review or are in the middle of their large development review process. Some of those are shown on this map, but the completed ones are all shown in the dark blue, dark green, and I guess the kind of gold color. So
Eric, it looks like we got a question from Jonathan Pira here.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey Eric, on your last slide, you talked about some of the limitations we have with these plans, particularly related to, this is a conceptual nature program. There's a sort of distinction between what the city might view as a minimum, developers view as a maximum, and also this problem of the development assumptions don't always match the actual market-driven development. We see this all the time with huge projects. We say we're going to lay out all these plats and we want to subdivide them and sell them off, something along those lines. But by the time this plan gets done, conditions have changed. Or I shouldn't even say by the time the plan is done, halfway through the development, conditions have changed and things might come out differently. And given that so many of our city plans are already highly conceptual, like they'll say, hey, we really want to, for public health reasons, we want to make sure that there's a lot of green space or that there's a lot of public access to X. But there aren't hard requirements set in those plans. Those are already the conceptual goals, and we've reviewed that with the public. What is the function? Why do the LDRs not get to a next level of, say, prescribed specificity on those? So instead of saying like, well, the city's plan says we want to maximize green space. So now in the LDR, we've gone through 200 days of review, and we want a tenant in there that says, please maximize green space. Instead, sort of because we know these are going to be subdivided and phased out, et cetera, why are we not setting rules along the lines of, okay, by the end of this land being built, or say, whenever a new road is developed in here, it must have underlying utilities that meet at least this grade of sewage capacity, because we are planning for the future of, say 50,000 persons here, must carry this much electrical line. And by the end of the development's progress, there must be at least, I'm making up numbers here, like 25% green space, something along those lines. As that would theoretically allow any developer to go in and say, well, I know how to meet my minimum requirements. And, if I want to do subdivide and sell the land out, or if when we start building, there's actually very clear expectations on the minimums, and say market conditions change or whatever expectations change, that's actually fine as long as they've met this minimum criteria. And we don't have this distinction between what the city views as, a theoretical maximum or a theoretical minimum and a theoretical maximum for the developers. Because I think that the difficulty that we get caught up in here is that there aren't typically hard figures or expectations. It's just softer words like, please maximize, support, encourage, which of course is going to have a difference in understanding between the cities and the developers.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I definitely glossed over that a little bit. One of the main drivers of an infrastructure master plan is the location, size, and use, or what's comprised of the either public park or publicly accessible open space. Those aren't DOTI requirements per se.
Yep.
But those are things that are going into these agreements, into the framework, that there will be, and maybe when I'm talking about flexibility, what I'm trying to get at, if I use that one as an example, even though I'm thinking more of the DOTI infrastructure, but instead of saying the park will be 10.00 acres located in this location, it's more of the initial plan is to have this park in this location and this size, but other park locations that still serve these intent statements could be done in case they end up getting, a corporate headquarters that wants to come in and that needs 2 blocks here. That doesn't occur. So that's where I was heading at with the flexibility. But it is the large development review, to your point and question, it does take it to a firmer step in the process. The problem, or not yet, I don't want to say problem, but the problem is that even with a 6 or a 9 block area development, the master developer sorry if you guys can hear my dogs barking here. I got someone showed up at the door, but the developer doesn't know how all 9 blocks are going to be developed. They typically, when they start a big project, they usually have a couple people on the hook, right? They have a major apartment and a box store or something. So they do know part of it, but they are just doing their best guess or even their ideal outcome on what's going to happen on the rest of that site. And so even the large development framework, you get into a little bit of a, do you have to amend your master plan because, you know, my guess was wrong, and instead of an apartment building here, we're ending up with a mixed use commercial, both of which are allowed per the city adopted plan. It's just a little bit different. And then I know I gave a long answer there, but I want to hit on the DOTI specific part where I said DOTI follows the same criteria and requirements. If you build a public storm sewer main in a street, we require that your drainage report is accounting for that to be sized appropriately for all potential users. And we do it more conservatively on like the broad zoning, right? Because we're not going to size every road or every pipe for the absolute worst case densities, but we do have, you know, planning level rules of thumb that we use to ensure, and factors of safety to ensure that all the infrastructure, whether it's part of a large development review or not, is sized appropriately for a 30-year horizon, which is just as far as we go, right? We do have some strategic transportation plans that look even beyond that, but the baseline for the developer is to take care of that first 30-year horizon, ensure that everything that they do is going to be appropriate for what's planned for that area.
Yeah, and thanks, Eric. And to clarify, I think, yeah, I know it was long, but I think it did answer my question. I'm probably being insufficiently nuanced here, but it kind of sounds to me like in the hypothetical I gave, DOTI's requirements actually already do fit that mold. It's like, well, we're going to say you're assuming X number of people will be in here at some point, so please make sure you meet these standards with whatever road you build or drainage pattern you make. It almost seems like what I might be hearing is that CPD's requirements are overly prescriptive, and instead of saying, well, you're going to do at least X% multifamily or this many single family, it doesn't matter really which plot they're on. What matters is like that you get these goals of this many done. They're actually saying on this lot there will be an apartment, on this lot there will be here, instead of allowing for a bit of vagary in how the development turns out. Whereas DOTI standards are a little bit more they're minimums that need to be met that could account for any of the varieties of development, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, no, I think you read that back to me perfectly, better than I said it. But
thanks, Eric.
I will point out, I mean, while without a large development review, we are going to have a traffic study, a mobility study, a drainage study, and a sanitary study, right? We are going to do all those independent of it. So kind of the flip side of one of the benefits that I listed, sorry, is that our stuff is also easier to share with the other agencies and help drive some of their decisions on land use or density or park location, right? Do you want it next to this highest volume intersection, or do you want it in a little bit more of a secluded area? So that part does go both ways, and that's part of what works well with a large development review.
Great. Looks like we've got a question from Jake, and then Tinsley, you can go next if your hand's still raised, but it might be just up from before. But go ahead, Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. I do have a couple questions, Eric. One thing that I was looking at in particular was of particular note for me is the River Mile Stadium District and Ball Arena large development sites are effectively like one super site. I know they're different developers, but effectively they kind of are, almost 2 neighborhood sizes worth of, at least how the city classifies neighborhood sizes worth of like development. How does DOTI look at the adjacent IMPs and integrate them? Like I did peek into the Ball Arena one, and they have like a lot of connections into the River Mile in their plan. But I'm not sure that I saw that in the River Mile and some of the stadium. Just I know those are very preliminary things that they've shared, but like just when we think about this from a DOTI perspective and just sheerly moving that amount of people, which is a very exciting prospect. But I think if we look at like Riverfront Park, it's very hard to get in and out of Riverfront Park on almost any transportation mode.
Yeah, that's a good example there, because I do think that the overarching neighborhood plan that was done for the area, I'm not sure it includes the full stadium district, but it definitely fed into some of that. You know, it did lay out the major infrastructure corridors, the connections, and in an area, you know, like Riverfront Park example, Ball Arena and River Mile, they're bound by physical features that preclude the type of, you know, connections and porosity that we would like to have from purely a DOTI perspective. And so that they're limited. That limited actually works really well for tying the master plans together, because it's, you know, here is the connection over the rail. And the connectivity to the stadium district is really more limited than the connectivity to River Mile Ball Arena, right? Because River Mile Ball Arena has kind of got the rail corridor through there, but Stadium District has the river and the interstate also in between. So the connections are way more limited, but they do play hand in hand. The main part of that question is that we're not creating or identifying the infrastructure needs with the master plan. We're taking the requirements from DOTI's plans, whether it's Denver Moves Bikes or our strategic transportation plan and CPD's neighborhood plan, and ensuring that those connections are obtained in the IMP, and that they're obtained at the right time during the development process. That answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, I think it did, and I think it fed into my next one a little bit. And I couldn't agree more on the stadium district. Just trying to bike from the stadium to even a rail station feels impossible sometimes, even though they're right next to each other. But I think my other question, and forgive me, I'm kind of and it may be a misunderstanding on my part, I'm kind of losing track of where the IMP starts and like the mobility plan starts and or ends. Like when we're looking at these sites, like they are, especially like those three and like, you know, maybe like a Park Hill Golf Course or Broadway Park, like they're at a scale where they don't have neighborhood cultures yet. And so like we have a lot of ability to really influence how their mobility is done in the future. Are there minimal mobility requirements we look at with the IMPs, or is that part of the mobility plan? What am I confusing there too, if I am?
I think it's both, right? I mean, in most cases, you know, we don't have plots of land or these significant plots of infill development that we're not usually surprised that development's coming. So we're, you know, our master plans, our ped master plan, our bike master plan typically is already thought of what they want through there, but it can get adjusted or tweaked as we get into the development process. The timing, I think you were getting at a little bit. An infrastructure master plan is typically something required as part of a large development review. So it happens after it, but it also needs to be done before they start their subdivision. So it's actually kind of an additional step, and is really important when the phasing is different, or or when their lack of connectivity is there, so that we ensure that we get what we need for the project to work. You know, that the projects like River Mile, Ballerina, they also have overlapping plans, like our downtown multimodal plan, right? We have additional plans for some of these areas that feed into it, but that isn't always the case. If we go down to Loretto Heights, you know, that one really, when the developer came on board there, it's kicked off the entire process, right? The neighborhood plan was started, that led through the process, that required adjustments in our master plans, because you know, the connections and porosity changed through there. Loretto Heights had a lot of grade constraints, and I will mention, like, your comment on the you know, bike connection to the stadium district. I think that's one of the few areas the bike connectivity is better than the vehicle connectivity, because it is hard to get between those two spots, and at least there are a couple ped bridges and Broncos bridges to get through there.
It's great. I have one more, and then forgive me, everyone, I'll be done. But no, I appreciate it, Eric. I really like your comment about the grade concerns at Loretto, having recently hiked up that hill. But
Yeah.
with those two, sorry, the Stadium District and River Mile especially, I'm not sure this applies to Ballerina. It might apply to some of the like 5 Points developments as well. The big South Platte project that's coming, that got a federal grant recently, is that something where these large development plans will interface with that, and maybe can even be like a contributor of extra quality of life improvements or infrastructure improvements in those projects as well?
Yeah, that is definitely the case. You know, I think the identification of the open space areas, public park areas, those go hand in hand with a natural feature like the river. River Mile specifically and Ballerina, they both need to do significant river work to get the floodplain out of their properties. So not only are they, you know, someone who's going to be able to bring some amenities along the river, they need to change the river and implement some of our corridor plans for the river to free up the development property that they want on their property. So theirs is that is more unique. It's not typical that we can require even a major development project to redo the river channel, but River Mile wants to redo the river and needs to redo it. So
thanks, Eric. We got a question from Alicia, and then I got one from Tinsley in chat.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much for the presentation. This has been very, very informative. I just have a question with regard to public health. I heard a lot about some of the ways that you are incorporating other areas in terms of the mobility plan, traffic plan, drainage. Do you all have any connections or with maybe DDPHE to think about how these large developments are directly impacting public health? And are there specific guidelines that you're following or that are incorporated into this, potentially from the thoughts of using a health impact assessment or even a health equity assessment tool as you're building out these large development project frameworks?
So I don't want this to seem like a total punt, but that is part of the community planning and development neighborhood plan, right? Whether they're looking at some of their equity analysis or some of the impacts of the land use and the densities that are proposed in the plans, you know, those once adopted and the zoning appropriate for those, those are the allowed heights and densities and uses. So probably technically my answer is no. We aren't looking at it. We are trying to mitigate and manage the operations to ensure that we have good mobility connections, but what they're allowed to build out there on that site and in the project is probably more the step even prior to the large development review and the infrastructure master plan.
Great. And then our question, we'll do Tinsley's question on chat, and then we'll go to Joe.
I'll ask it. 'cause
Yeah, go
I
for it,
got a follow-
Tinsley. Yeah.
I got a follow-up question. So part of the problem in the far northeast too is that some of these developers are not held accountable for what they've promised to build or have changed their mind on what they are building. And unfortunately, I know that DOTI sometimes is stuck in the middle in terms of, they build a road first and then the developers decide to switch things up. And so I'm just wondering what the accountability process is in that regard, because I feel like there's some kind of a disconnect when you're looking at what the developers promise, and then what DOTI promises, and then kind of moving on down the line, promises aren't kept. So I just kind of want to go over your process. And then I think to Alicia's point too, it's really concerning that those processes are only in the beginning of the planning stages. I feel like speaking to some of like the community health assessments and those kinds of things, new developments change unpredictably and grow unpredictably. We're expected out here in the far northeast to grow 5 times more in the next 5 years. So that being said, we're not seeing things fast enough. Secondly, developers are changing their minds. And again, speaking to the process that you had brought up where, forgive me, now I forgot what I was going to say. But I think I think that's where I'm kind of getting at, is like, how can the planning process be held accountable further on down the line? Because 30 years is a long time and things change.
Yeah, so it's a good question. That's a tough question. I hope that you're not referring to a lot of DOTI requirements that we're not getting. We work really hard to ensure that we're getting them, that the metro districts are, for these major big projects, are on the hook to do improvements later. And then of course, I shouldn't say, I assume you're aware, but I'm not sure you're aware of that. In the far northeast, there's also gateway impact fees. So some of the infrastructure improvements are actually DOTI's responsibility down the road. Some of the arterial signals are those, but some of the other ones, like there are intersections that aren't. We won't allow them to signalize them today. It doesn't meet the warrant. But 10 years from now, it's expected to be warranted. We do work to ensure that the district is on the hook to do it. Well,
I'll tell you an example. And this light is actually now under bond, so it's going to get done, which is great. But like there was a long process of where community members did not understand the process and did not. I think this light was just not on the radar at first, the Almendorf light. So there was a lot of development, lots of roads made as part of the requirement. But a perfect example is there's a cut through in the median that people need to get through and turn left. And so with those new developments and like the apartments and structures like that, it made it extremely difficult. And it was unforeseeable from you guys. Like, it's not something that like is anybody's fault, because they didn't realize that probably that you couldn't see past the large apartment building. People weren't thinking of that. So like I'm looking for that kind of accountability in terms of, well, what if there needs to be a light and we plan for there not to be a light, and then there's a very long process and like kind of backtracking to put something in that should have been in there in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does
Okay.
make sense. I'm not as familiar with that specific example, but I know there's a couple others in your area where intersections are now proposed to be signalized that did not meet the operational needs, or we're not, the traffic analysis didn't show that it would meet a signal warrant, but actual operations, there's either a safety issue or something else going on out there that drives that need. That does happen. Our goal is to account for those as much as we can in the master plan process, in the subdivision process, and specifically the roadway designs that they're doing as part of each subdivision. So definitely the intent is to get those as best we can. And when we can't, try to adjust as much as we can.
Great. Joe.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Eric, for this presentation. I just had a question, if I could get a little better understanding on the phasing, which seems to be a very critical part of what you're doing. And I think that's what my neighborhood sees when they're like on 9th in Colorado. When does the park get built? When is that? Are there triggers? I understand that you can't predict every building. This will be first, this will be second. But are there triggers like, okay, there's a park area. After you build so many square feet, then you have to put the park in. I realize developers do not want to spend money up front if they don't have to.
That is exactly something that goes into either a framework agreement or is hard coded into a master plan on, once you get to either, this much development or this much area of development, you need to start your design. And then by the next phase, you must have it constructed and open. Those are definitely things that are in there. We do the same thing for roadways, right? When you get, and we try, with my flexibility kind of comment before, we try not to hard code it to the exact phase, but to say when the level of development matches what is expected with these first two phases, then you must build this road, or you must build the additional lane on this road, or for the signal example, when warranted, you'll need to build the signal. So those are definitely items that can be included in a master plan. Sometimes we do development agreements to formalize them even more or tweak them over time. But yes, that is one of the main intents of the large development review, the framework, and the master plan.
I like that. One thing is that enforced? I mean, do you periodically go out and check on that, make sure they're following through?
It is. I mean, with the phase development, it's easier. The ones that are harder is when you can build your whole development, but the expectation for the signal isn't, it's needed 20 years down the road when there's more growth in Commerce City, for the far northeast area example. Those are harder to get at, but the ones that are development phases, that just becomes part of our process. When the next phase starts, we're checking, all right, did they meet the triggers here? How's this operating? And ensuring that we get what we need with the subsequent phase.
And quick comment in chat, just for folks that are listening online and can't hear this. Alicia said potentially a health equity assessment tool could be adopted by the city as part of the LDR plan that could help guide the overall project throughout its implementation, even after the community plan. Just food for thought. And then Tinsley echoed that sentiment as well. Every 5 years or so, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little unfamiliar with some of those, the health equity outcomes, because the one thing you can't do at the LDR, you can't go in and say, you can't build this density, because that density is already approved by city council in the neighborhood plan and the zoning that property has. We can get mitigation and get improvements to respond to that density. So I'm probably not the right one to answer that question for you, Alicia. Sorry.
No worries. I wasn't thinking of it in terms of you answering the question, just kind of thinking about the guidelines within that. It's broader than thinking of density and how you can build density. It goes more into what the project or how the project is impacting health on an ongoing basis. And I'm happy to share some information around the connection between a plan like this and a health equity assessment tool, or even a health impact assessment. And I can email those to you, but I've seen them used collectively, or similar tools used collectively in other cities, and they seem to work well together throughout the process, not just at the beginning of the process. But I do agree that something should take place even before the LDR.
Yeah, and I can say, you know, the equity analysis that community planning and development does, they don't have tools to implement those, right? It is not in their zoning, but they do use the large development review to implement some of the outcomes identified in their equity analysis. So that sounds like a similar idea that you're talking about on the health side, environmental condition side.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to see what that looked like then. More so.
Cool. Well,
Thank you.
Alan, I don't know how you normally manage this. I was assuming I could give a copy of my PowerPoint to be provided with the meeting minutes, or throw it in the chat or whatever. But that was definitely my intent, so people can zoom in on the map and stuff. And
great, yeah, we'd love that. Yeah, if you could pass that on to myself or Nanita or Gary, that would be outstanding. Thank you so much, Eric. We've really appreciated. This is brand new for so many of us, and there's so many more LDRs than I think I had ever imagined. And Glenn, thank you for joining us as well. Go ahead if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, thank you. I just kind of wanted to let everybody know that is on this call what an outstanding job Eric has just done attempting to answer questions all across the city and including multiple agencies. So I applaud Eric and his subject matter expertise with all of this, because most of us, you'd need an entire panel of people to be able to answer the way Eric just answered most of these questions. The one thing I would say is, if there are further questions that you know, the panel would really like to get more in depth, it probably should be something with a CPD, DDPHE, including then a DOTI member too. So, you know, a lot of things that Eric was you know, addressing are things that are outside of DOTI's purview, but he tried to answer it in the best of his you know, expert knowledge. But if we're really wanting to, you know, get to the certain point to make some of the impacts that were discussed with the panelists, you know, a CPD and DDPHE individual would really help that out. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, and thank you both again. I think you hit the nail on the head. The knowledge that Eric brought to the conversation tonight is certainly unquestionable, and we're really appreciative for him for coming, and for you joining us as well, Glenn. And we certainly can go back to the board and see what topics folks would like to dive into further. But thank you for doing your best ability to address questions even outside of the DOTI scope based on your background knowledge, Eric. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. Well, a couple of topics. This is going to be Nanita, would you mind giving me presenter ability real quick? Or co-host ability if possible. And Eric, if you don't mind relinquishing the screen sharing as well when you get a moment. But again,
trying to find
it's a little red stop button should be at the top of your screen. Probably different spot
there it is.
Than Teams. Yeah, perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Well, again, thank you, Eric. One question or one thing I'll have switching topics here for the group. Something that's come up in Northeast Denver. This will be going to the policy committee, but just want to give anyone a preview in case you'd like to join in on the discussion of this. is sidewalks around new construction. So we wanted to come up with kind of a recommendation that we can present to the department. We've seen some, sidewalks going in on new construction and sidewalks not going in on new construction. I'll just show if Nanita or Nick, if either of you guys is able to make me a co-host, I'll share my screen, but
Sure.
this is just a next topic for discussion. So anyone that wants to join the policy committee on this can, but the gist of it is we're, as you all are aware, Ordinance 307 has specific carve outs for new construction and major renovation projects, right? So in our neighborhood, we're seeing a lot of turnover of old homes being torn down and new homes being built, lots of renovations and things like that. So something that, screen share, thank you so much for enabling that, is we're seeing things like, sidewalks not going in on some of the new construction here. So we wanted to explore some of the options that DOTI has on the table for regulation and make a policy regulation, because ideally we'd love to see the sidewalk network built out as quickly. You see the Hollywood curb here. And some of the new construction again going in here. This was a major renovation project here. You can see this gentleman walking down the street that had to walk into the street in Elder. But there is some good news. There's some great stuff going in too. This was just in the last few weeks. This sidewalk got installed on a new construction, same in a neighborhood. This one right here, great example of how the Hollywood curb cut goes into here in a more offset. So we'll be talking about with the policy committee, but excited to bring that up. Just wanted to preview that for anyone that might be interested in the topic. And the other thing I wanted to call out is if you all have any examples from your neighborhoods of this happening. Eileen had the great idea of wanting to see this examples of this from elsewhere in the city. Please feel welcome to share with me. I'd love to kind of compile this as we kind of research this in a little bit more. And that's a good transition. Anyone from the policy committee have any updates that you all would like to share based on how your meetings have been going? Gary or Eileen or Jake or Chia?
Well, I have nothing specific. I know Alicia has views. Joe's got some comments, so on. So go for it.
Well, if you're asking my comments about the sidewalk, I think, yeah, we welcome anybody to come and see what it is. And I found it's kind of a strange area because people are probably waiting for their sidewalks in the new ordinance to be built. But we have this sort of interim period. And of course, all new construction should have to have some upgrade to it. But I have to get more into what the rule is. And some of those pictures that Alan was showing are absolutely awful. I mean, even if we're not talking about accessibility, it's not right for our city to throw a bunch of rocks to the street. So really want to have to dive deep into it to make sure. And again, it's complicated a little bit by the new ordinance saying, well, why should I build my sidewalk when I'm not responsible for the sidewalk anymore? So just want to get into it. And I'm sure it's going to take several meetings, but anybody who has a passion for this, please come and join us at our meeting. We'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
When is the next policy committee, Joe?
Gary?
Gary?
Yeah, it's the 17th at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we typically put out a link. Jake has been very helpful in doing that. So if you're interested, either email me or any of the members of the policy committee, and we'll get you on the invite list for sure.
Anything else planned for your agenda this month, Gary, that you'd like to share?
Well, I did ask for items to be discussed just recently, so there's nothing solid at this point. We did have some discussions at our last meeting about the red light camera program and how DOTI is looking to take that over. We also had a discussion regarding the right turn on red issues and what's involved with some of that. And I guess policy suggestions are yet to come with some of those out of our committee. I do have a question though for DOTI or Nicholas even. is that I noticed that 2 policies were published the end of March regarding, all pedestrians are, I don't know, there were 2, and they came out at the same time you were celebrating the Broadway launch. So I don't know how those fit with our policy committee, or could you explain some of the background to those, please?
Nick, you're muted still.
I am. Thank you, Alan. And I was real quick. I was saying I wasn't at the Broadway event, but I'm pretty sure Amy announced some kind of. I don't want to. Maybe not quite policy yet on it, but really a new approach to safety. Does what any specific terminology used? I'm feeling.
And Nick, I've got a copy of the press release that we got from Nancy, and I'm happy to forward that over to Gary and the policy committee so they can take a deeper dive. One of them I think was around mode shift.
Yep.
I believe. And the other, I apologize, was around kind of a further doubling down on Vision Zero, the commitments around people priority, moving people. Yeah.
Yep, I think these are our big goals for 2024, and likely what we probably be best is I can have Amy come and, well, Amy or myself come and present on that at the next meeting, either in the executive update or as a special item on that. Happy to do that. Yeah, thank you, Alan, for refreshing my memory.
Certainly acceptable for us on the policy committee, Nicholas. We're just wanting to know, how those were promulgated.
Yep, absolutely. And yeah, to your point, I don't think they've been officially promulgated either through policy but the goal would be to move in that direction.
Yeah, sure. Well, then in that case, let us know what we can do as a policy committee and of course the advisory board, how that all.
Will do. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for those updates from the policy committee. Wanted to plug a quick event coming up that Director Ford is going to be at, as well as several folks from the board. It is a Vision Zero meeting led by the Denver Inter-Neighborhood Cooperative, Inc., kind of the umbrella for all of our registered neighborhood organizations. It will be this Saturday, April 13th at 1201 North William Street on the 19th floor. I'm sure that has gorgeous views of Denver. And it's going from 8:45 to 11. Starts at 9. Networking, I guess, starts at 8:45. But Director Ford will be there, as well as I've heard the CDOT Chief Engineer will be there, folks from the Denver Streets Partnership. So I think it'll be a good conversation around Vision Zero and creating safer streets for Denver as well. One other thing that Jake and I just wanted to put out for the group is really we're kind of in our toddler stage of we're kind of moving past our toddler stage of being a board, 2 or 3 years old now. And we just wanted to take this opportunity to ask for input from you all. What can we do better as a board? What can we do better to make you all feel that you're having meaningful contributions back to the board, back to the city of Denver as a whole? So just wanted to, we're excited. Director Ford has reached out to us and is going to have a small meeting with Jake and I about this. But before we do that, we wanted to get input from you all. So if you have any thoughts now, you're welcome to provide them. But if you want to provide any thoughts offline, sending us email or things like that of how we can do better for you all, or ideas that you might have for the future of the board as we kind of evolve, we'd always love to get input from any of you. We really value, we recognize you're all volunteers and you've dedicated a lot of hours to this. And we just want to say thank you for everything you've done and want to make sure that we're evolving this in a meaningful way. Jake, would you add anything else to that?
If I can unmute. No, I think that was a great update. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, great. Any other odds or ends from the group? No, great. Well, with that note, we'll adjourn our meeting. Gary and the rest of the policy committee, I'll forward on the press release that came from that Broadway bike lane with those new policy updates. And we will look forward to seeing all of you in a month from now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good meeting today, guys. Thanks, everyone.